Human groups are made of human systems. This show stands at the practical intersection of counterintelligence, trauma psychology, and systems thinking. My research focuses on how people, groups, and institutions lose the ability to see reality clearly, and what happens when decisions keep getting made anyway. I'm Kip Perez, and this has changed the game. Welcome back to Change the Game. And today I want to talk about autism. Most conversations about it are built for comfort, and they're willing to trade truth and accuracy for that comfort. And they're full of symbols and stories and so-called representation that make outsiders feel like they're being compassionate while steadily and insistently erasing the realities that actually keep people living in those realities alive. And dependence is assumed and support is invisible or fake, and the very real risk is minimized. And when reality doesn't match the script, families get blamed for the mismatch. Today's guest, Sarah Kernion, refuses that script. Sarah's the author and host of the Substack and podcast Inchstones. She writes from the perspective of a mother caring for two children with profound non-speaking autism and is a voracious student of John Boyd's OODA loop. Sarah lives in a world where orientation is always incomplete, stakes are asymmetric, and failure is potentially lethal harm. So her work deals in consequence, but as a result, it also deals in profound meaning. So this conversation is going to be what happens when narratives train us to expect an easier reality than the one some families are forced to live in. So Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. I always get excited when I get to talk to you, and it's been a hot minute.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think that was one of the most gracious introductions I've ever received. So thank you for that, Kit.
Oh, awesome. Well, I want to jump into it, and I want to start out by asking, from where you sit, what do people who talk about autism most consistently get wrong about what actually matters day to day, and what does that misunderstanding cost in real terms?
First of all, I love going right at it because I'm like the president of the I Hate Small Talk fan club. So thank you for going right at it. The to answer that simply is that we are sold, conditioned, told a narrative that simply doesn't describe the reality of what families, mothers, caregivers like I live in with children with profound non-speaking autism. The narratives, the false narratives around the lives of of children with autism, non-speaking, level 3, profound, true autism, whatever you'd like to call it, they assign roles inside that false narrative. And, the fastest way to control a person's orientation is to hand them a script, right? The media, the news, any relayer of information to you, once you are assigned that role, begins to uh, confirm that identity. And so I write from the position of challenging assumptions around those narratives, and to radically expose the reality in an effort not to model or say this is the right way to do it, but as a way to hold up a mirror to show other women, mothers, and caregivers in similar situations of mine that it can look radically different too, and that you don't have to accept that script.
So I immediately want to bring up your Autistic Barbie article,
Mm-hmm.
because that really speaks to what you're talking about in terms of narrative. If I've if I have a child who's just been diagnosed, or I think he's going to be diagnosed, or I've been dealing with this for a couple of years and wondering, is this all there is, so to speak? And I mean that from the perspective of, like you say in your article, slumped shoulders, say that 5 times fast,
Yeah, exactly.
leggings, hoodie, dark circles, and you get this stereotype in your head that's almost self-reinforcing. Well,
That's right.
everywhere I look, this is what I see, so this must be it. But you're saying no.
Yeah, I'm saying that the culture around an identity doesn't need to police anything if the story that you actually live is in your head, right? So the the backstory on all on how this all went down is that a very prevalent autism company society publication about 6 or 7 months ago, when the internet was fascinated that ChatGPT could take the descriptors that you put in about yourself and create an action figure, right? Like a sealed in plastic action figure.
Mhm.
And this publication, a neurodiversity publication, put out about, the autism doll, the autism mom doll. And it illuminates, that she's unkempt, running mascara, bags under her eyes, uncombed hair, coffee stains on her shirt, you know, uh, basically in like a pajama looking outfit, and with a very like negative to sad look on her face. And what I believe that when I saw that, I think this is what it's doing. It's confirming that if the narrative tells you that autism, that your child with autism ends you, you're going to stop building a life for yourself. You're just
Mm.
going to just stop. You're going to say, "Oh, I do feel all those things. I am that." And once you start, just like seeing, if you say, "Do you ever see a red car?" Well, no, I don't see red cars, but you start talking about red cars and you start seeing red cars. If that's the model that you are given as your child is first diagnosed, that this is going to end your life and it's going to keep you isolated and withdrawn from the world, you will begin to live like that. And the article that I wrote recently was almost like the second phase of trying to expose that, because the story will name you and limit you unless you rewrite it. And we confuse sometimes, specifically like in this doll form in Autism Barbie and the Autistic Mom doll as the precursor to it. We assume that something that is realistic is societally approved. And that's narrative training, right? That's so when Autism Barbie came out last Monday, it's copy paste. It wasn't an aha moment for me. It was like, here we go again. So Autism Barbie is well put together. She has her headphones, she has a fidget in her hand, she's well dressed. She has a device in her hand, like an AAC device to communicate, which again is showing one part of autism. But the autism that doll decided to show was, I'm autistic and I'm not going to make you uncomfortable. My
Mm.
autism, and that also is the secondary thing that Autism Barbie reveals to me is Autism Barbie is alone. And I believe that there needs to be a drastic divide within the spectrum of autism as a whole. But Autism Barbie, if it's true autism, she's not alone. Autism Barbie that they showed was independent Autism Barbie, which in my mind is independent neurodivergent autism Barbie who has some things that she needs support with, just like any other human being Barbie.
Yeah, I think that's a really huge point. Every human being needs
Every human
support.
being.
We're hardwired for connection. And
Hmm.
so it's almost like that whole I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man literally made it over to Autism Barbie.
Bingo. Without it, it's exactly it. It's exactly it. Made it over to it. And I had a friend through a public speaking course, a gentleman that's become a mentor of mine, say, "I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 40 years. If they start coming out with like diabetic GI Joe, I'm gonna lose my mind." And I go, "I think they already have it." He said because he's like, I know that autism and diabetes aren't the same thing, but you put a little patch on a plastic doll with a monitor to read your glucose. I'm sorry, but that's only serving one thing. It's serving the false narrative, and that's not reality.
So let's press into this because I see an opportunity to make this conversation even more uncomfortable. So I'm all here for that.
Love it. Yep.
Is it true, do you think, that when you have these narratives and you have these stereotypes and things like that, to some extent it morphs and evolves over time where it becomes almost feeding a martyr syndrome. I don't
Hmm.
want to look like I have everything together. I don't want to take care of myself. I don't want to explore options, change my orientation, explore some options because I have now fused my identity to this. And this is giving me so much validation. I cannot mentally and emotionally afford to let go of it.
Absolutely. A culture that praises the exhausted martyr mother of children with autism, they praise that because exhaustion keeps the system cheap, right? It's
Mm.
it that when you're only honored while you're wrecked, one moment away from melting down, you're actually being managed without seeing that you're being managed. You're not being celebrated. They're managing what you're allowed to do with that identity. And it becomes sort of this sorting mechanism, right? Like, okay, if you play that role, we're going to let you be seen, we're going to help you, but we're also going to decide who gets pushed off to the side. So good autism mom or good autism Barbie is whatever doesn't disturb anyone else and keeps the majority and the public comfortable, because the story that comforts the public often costs the reality of the family living that diagnosis.
So, how do you balance this, right? Because on one hand, someone could listen to what you're saying and think, well, me being unkempt or me being exhausted and depressed and losing myself within this framework is uncomfortable for other people. And yet, I can also look at you and your life and how you manage your own narrative and you step outside of these stereotypes. And do you find that there's a difference there? How do you juxtapose that? Do you think that you
Um,
make people more uncomfortable?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. I think every time I step out of my house, especially with my kids in tow, I make everyone uncomfortable. And that knowing that, sort of owning that is it has evolved over time, right? Like at first when they were an infant and 2.5 and those behaviors were brand new to me and I didn't know what I was doing, I was buckling in to the martyrdom of this life. Like they're right. I'm never going to be who I wanted to be. So then extracting from that did at some point probably take me to the other end where I became like the Sherpa of autistic children and traveling everywhere and I'm gonna prove like I have photos of me just like almost killing myself to do everything the opposite. And then finding my way back to the meet to the middle is simply that my life is such a mismatch for what the majority of typical public consumption is that I don't even have to do anything. I don't have to do anything to make others uncomfortable based on how I live, express, and my children just simply are who they are. And as an extension of the house, after outside the house of the walls of our home. But I think
But
I've learned to live in that discomfort as a way that that feels truthful. And I've become very comfortable in being an uncomfortable symbol.
talk to me more about that. What is it about you that makes the average person, let's say you guys, are going to the zoo, we'll say,
Hmm.
what makes you more uncomfortable to the people around you than we'll call her unkempt autism martyr mom?
Say that again, just so I can let this sit.
Sorry.
It's okay.
If you take your kids to the zoo, and there's always people at the zoo,
Uh-huh.
what makes you more uncomfortable to them than the unkempt autism martyr mom?
I guess it always goes back to it's a mismatch. We are primarily wired as like human beings to our curiosity is innate because curiosity stems from something's a mismatch,
Mhm.
right? There's a glitch in what the predictive outcome of what they're supposed to see when they walk outside the houses. So if it's Autism Awareness Day, sensory friendly day at the zoo, and another autism mom is there who I might know through the grapevine or know from school or just, have reference of each other or just a stranger who's using a wagon or a leash or a harness system for their son. And I'm holding an iPhone in one hand, having Millie stim and sing to her songs while I'm letting Mac click his magnetiles, pulling a wagon, but also smiling at my partner, laughing and making light of like, look at our life. And it's happy and it's joyful and the kids are happy. And the other woman I look over to might express or present as, slugging along, looking and showing off to the world that she is exhausted, that she doesn't want to be there. She's frustrated that her child's not, behaviorally cooperating. I become a mismatch in her eyes, not because of who I am, but because of what she's been told she is.
And what
And
she's
that
been told she has to be.
because she's there and she's the mom with the kid with autism. And at some point, it allows her or people like that live in that to stay so comfortable living it like that, right? There's a placation to the norm of the stereotype. And there's a lot of they get a lot of validation from that. There was a woman that commented on my article and she said, but I am that some days. Like I totally am. I said, of course you are. We all are. But when it's told for you to be that and wear that as your number one hat, that of anything that you are given to portray as an autism mom, it's not a cape. It's not a cover to don proudly. It is a disheveled mess of sensory overload. And that inherently is so wrong. And again, people don't understand it until they realize that they've been fed a narrative about almost any part of their life, right? Like, I say so often in my keynote talks, and I say, no one at my age woke up in the Upper West Side of Manhattan and was like, you know what I want? Two kids with non-speaking autism. Like that wasn't on my bingo card. Like I was supposed to be lunching in the Upper East Side, going to the museums, taking my children to the MoMA, applying for the Brownstone School. Like that was the trajectory that I was hell bent on being mine. And when that didn't happen, thank God, really, I always say Millie and then Mac radically saved my life from being a false narrative. It allowed me to get really quiet around truth and discovery and honestly orientation because we are lacking the ability to reorient as a culture because we're told we can't.
I love this so much. It almost made me get a little choked up for a second. And
Sorry, I get on fire. I don't mean to be
no,
that, but
no, I think you should be that because it's authentic and it's beautiful in a very fierce way. And it kind of leads into what I was actually going to ask you anyway. Something I say to people a fair amount is, I hope you have an intentionally joyous day. And it's
hmm
kind of a joke, but it's not at the same time because I do believe that joy is chosen regardless
hmm
of circumstance. And that's really what you're describing. That,
hmm
okay, yeah, I didn't get this fairy tale that I've
mm
concocted for myself, but I love my life and I wouldn't change it. And if you could tell me I could change it, I would choose what I have and I would still be joyful.
Yes, and I think to parallel that in a totally different bucket of thought is what's like a common phrase? It's like if someone comments on something or sees someone in the news or sees a couple or sees a family, they're like, gosh, what a lucky look at that couple. They're so lucky, or that family is so lucky. And I think to myself, no one ever knows how much we are the creators of our own luck.
Mm.
Behind every happy couple and every special needs family that is joyful and interacts with the world is a daily choice to constantly engage, challenge the narrative, push all assumptions about who each of us are, and continue to do the next right thing. That's luck. Luck doesn't land you with joy every day without conscious, and implicit guidance and control to that action of joy.
Well, you can't wait for, and I think this is something that a lot of people do, is they're totally willing to have joy. They're totally willing to as soon as they feel it.
hmm
But that I think is part of the crux of orientation to begin with, is that you don't wait for the feelings. The feelings will follow,
Hmm.
And even if they don't, as you said, you still do the next right thing. You still go,
Right.
okay, what is the reality? And for you to, it sounds like this has been a journey for you when you found out you were the mother of Millie and she has these issues. You don't just sit there and go, oh, okay, well, let me reorient. It's Monday, and by Tuesday
Right, right.
morning,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
have it all together. No, this has been a process, and that's why I think you speak with such authenticity because you're still in the process. You're
Oh,
still refining.
which is exactly what Boyd and the OODA loop sketch and orientation is about. It's constantly revising that every single second with every interaction with people, ideas, and things, right? And it's that, the OODA loop is always misinterpreted as like a way to like speedily or like or readily or quickly or fast movingly beat your competitor. The only competitor against me and my children is my own sense of what is to come next. And when I got really quiet with that, I actually think that yes, now in hindsight, I reoriented much quicker than most do to this reality. It did not look fast at the beginning at all. It was so conscious. It was so vulnerable. I dove so deeply into sharing Millie's diagnostic journey on my social media on Instagram at first when I was, simply just like a mommy blogger, just sharing about life and motherhood and leaving New York City. That was the foundational balm that began to change and allow me to reorient quicker because I just said, I don't want to hide this reality. I can't be, I know that I'm just like everyone. I am a glob of space dust flying through the universe. There is definitely one other person that's going through something similar. And I think that vulnerability is oftentimes misaligned with orientation. I think vulnerability can allow you to reorient quicker when as a way to expose reality's truth because there's a lot of control, the narrative control, the reframing of the narrative, the false narrative around autism and the levels of autism and the constraints and what bottlenecks those force for the families, that the reality of it and writing about that and sharing about the depth of what I was experiencing is what I think now allowed me to reorient quicker than most.
So, talk to me about this Instagram journey that you did because they're everywhere, right?
Hmm.
If I had a nickel for every social media account that I have seen or even followed over time, right? Because you get emotionally invested in these
Hmm.
stories and these families, and you weren't looking for validation per
Mm-mm.
se. You weren't looking for identity, which I think is the case for many of these accounts. You're looking for what?
I was looking to probably in the earlier days, I was looking to share in a way to illuminate a radically unique path that I never anticipated I would be on as a way to honestly just document my life. I mean, yes, it was for public consumption. It was it was a way for me to almost it was like writing therapy.
So
You
you're
know,
basically processing this
it
shift.
was a live processing of it for sure.
Okay.
It was a live processing. And then what ended up the transformation of that was that as someone who has always been a writer and emoter and someone who, I love one-on-one conversations. I would, like I've said to you before, Kit, I would love to spend 3 days and be like, I want to know your whole life story. Like take me back, earliest memory, go. Oh my God, go. Like there's something about like the realities directly from the source of someone that I've always craved. And I guess I thought if I share this with such radical truth and honesty, it has to be a roadmap for someone else. And if it's not, at least I have documentation from a memoir standpoint for my own, like for my own self, to remind myself what I went through at some
Do,
point.
do you ever go back and rewatch some of that old stuff and think, oh my goodness, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yes, yes, I do. I look back the hard, I mean, it's a lot of it. I am so glad that I wrote about it and attached some photos because I have a tough time conjuring up details at times because it was such a fog of stress. It was so, it was like this vortex of like being upside down and shaken and someone going, "Where's north? Where's north?" Right? And you're like, "I don't even know where the ground is," and I'm trying, and this is like I have a typical 5-year-old. I've got a 2.5-year-old who can't even step outside on the crunching leaves, and an infant that I'm trying to literally nurse and feed, and I'm not sleeping. And I mean, it really was like buds training for like moms. Like I felt like I was now looking back, I was like I was a Navy SEAL buds training. And when I think back to reading those and what jumps off the page for me is that I was laying the foundation for what I'm able to do now, which was I just could not believe and I would not accept that my children were to meet a standard that their bodies and minds were never even on the same page, book, set, Britannica, anything. And the acceptance of that from such an early on phase pops out for me a lot from the photos and how I write, because I knew in my bones that I was to not accept what was being told for me about who they were and how their independence would grow and what their purpose is. I just my cells just rejected it from the beginning.
So what do you tell people? Because obviously you're an advocate in the autism space. So you talk to a lot of moms
Hmm.
and not just locally, right?
No,
Internationally.
everywhere. Hmm.
So when someone comes to you and says, okay, this all sounds really good, how do I stop being unkempt autism martyr mom? Because deep down, I, like you, reject the idea, but I don't know how to break out of the box. What do you tell them? Where do they start?
I say to them, I guess this is a condensed version. I say to them you stop by changing what you allow, what you carry, and what you require one decision at a time. So that's what, inch stones. It's always, inch by inch instead of these milestones that we are conditioned to believe our children need. I also say you're not wrong for being in survival mode. Martyrdom often happens when you're unsupported, right? So if you're constantly being affirmed in your unsupported state, the 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 life raft of that martyrdom, I'm not going to take it away. We're just going to build you a much better boat for it. And it's not that the goal is to become this like, you know, toxic positive mother. The goal is to actually allow yourself to be self-led again, to emerge as the person that you are going to be, that's underneath this mask that you didn't even realize you put on. And that requires one small decision at a time. So reclaiming yourself often begins with the most basic routine in home, which is, do you spend 5 to 10 minutes a day either in silence with either before your children wake up or before you go to bed? Do you spend 5 to 10 minutes in total silence, in total gratitude, or journaling? Do you do that? It's like a yes or no. Do you spend 5 to 10 minutes a day standing outside and breathing? And it seems so simple, but I say, like, those are the things that have to slowly get you to believe that you can change and strip yourself of this mask of what you allow yourself to believe is inevitably going to happen to you. There's the mindset of like, I have to do it all. Like, they have to get to this, they have to get to that, to a mindset of, I decide what gets done. What am I doing that's not mine to do? Like there's so many things that we do just so unconsciously. And the protective nature that you can reclaim for yourself, that, you know, rest rest is an infrastructure to the caregiving life. Rest is not selfish. There's no my child doesn't need proof of me being a martyr for their health and happiness, the the endurance that is so validated by society, that's not required. You can do all, and the less that we look externally for that life raft, the more that we start building it internally, the boat and the rescue of oneself becomes the most like beautiful yacht to carry you through, right? And I'm not saying that that's easy, but it is slow and conscious choice day after day. And the irony is that that's what most profoundly autistic kids respond to best too, which is slow, small changes every single day.
You know, you're not saying that endurance is wrong. You're saying society defines it incorrectly.
hmm I mean, we don't nearly have enough time in a year to talk about how much the system has failed when it comes to the requirements dictated for special needs mothers and caregivers.
Oh, I'm
There's
sure.
no amount of um there's no amount of like help per se that's out there right now in arm's reach that will even dissipate the endurance that is actually expected of autism parents. Um, I know fellow authors on Substack, but one of them that's a SEAL. I said, the irony is that you got to deploy home. I don't. And I don't say that from a sense of like having a moral like high ground. I say that in the sense of that's what we've been conditioned to expect from an endurance standpoint. That respite is a gift instead of a requirement. That rest is selfish, not required infrastructure for health. You know, it's it's taken the verbiage and the way in which I'd say probably just mainstream media and the fast, swirl of our global village now has almost insisted upon it. And to take back that and to harness it internally will transform your life. And as my partner says, the only easy day was yesterday. It's never going to be easy. Never.
What do you
And
want?
that's not a
Oh, go ahead.
personality. And I was going to say, but martyr mode is not the personality that you should desire. That's a support problem, right? You have to stop disappearing into the martyrdom and start rising to your femininity, to your womanhood, to your motherhood, um, to self-lead your own positive, joyful, healthy existence.
And what you're describing is liberation.
It's so deeply liberating. And again, I can't ever I put this in a sentence in my most recent article. I wish I had I wish I had a product to take the pain away. Because so many mothers that I talk to are like, I just don't know how you do it. Like, what is your secret? What is this? And I always say, first of all, it makes me so sad that that is the express sentence to me from another mother in a similar situation. Because she's like confirming what I write about always is that even she's doing it to someone who's in the same boat. And I always say, I'm not here to like be a celebrity to showcase what life can look like. I do that as an effort to hold up the mirror as to what's possible beyond martyrdom, beyond wiped beyond exhausted beyond, it was such like self-erasure sacrificial parenting. You know, that the reality that I try to live and be an example for is simply a mirror. And that's hard for people because we live so deeply embedded in a culture that just wants that quick fix. And it's just like what's going on now with addictions and trauma, that we are a society that's like, give me the hit, give me the hit, give me the hit. I want it now. I want it now. It's not going to happen like that. It's not at all. But it will if you wake up and manifest the idea that these small changes within yourself will end up having you rise from that mask. That's the foolproof nature of what I teach.
I want to push back for a second, not because I disagree with you, because
I
I
love it.
obviously don't,
Do it.
but I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about what you're saying, I'm also putting myself in the shoes that I don't wear. And that is, what would it be like to be, unkempt autism mom? I hate that we have coined this phrase now, but here we are.
Yep.
and and thinking, well, it's all fine and good for you to sit there with your iPhone in one hand while your kids are stimming themselves and doing that. Well, that's not my reality. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy for you to tell me what my life should look like. How
Mm-hmm.
do you answer those people? Because I know that you get that feedback.
I think I when I receive sort of like a defensive feedback like that, the number one thing any defensive posturing shows me is that you're lacking the desire to to expand your orientation. So I actually feel like I have compassion when someone says that to me because it's so obvious to me that they're fighting that innate desire to reorient. Because it's actually not about the iPhone and it's actually not about the smile on my face as I look at my partner. It's actually not about singing Belle to my daughter from, the Disney playlist she loves for the 51st millionth time. It's actually not about that. What they're so angry about is how that defensive posturing of what they say, like, you don't know my reality. You're right, I don't. But that's not what I'm trying to illuminate. I'm trying to illuminate within you that your defensiveness should be cueing you into something. Your anger is actually not towards me. It's pointed at yourself because you know you have it in you to change that.
Why
Um,
doesn't she want to?
that's that's for her to figure out. That's if you stop looking, if she doesn't want to, then you become a vacuum. It's like the example of like you just become a vacuum and you become absorbent to only things that validate that exhaustive narrative. And if you choose to do that, yet are defensive to those who live in misalignment to that confirmed identity of you, what does your defensiveness say? No one would ever get defensive about someone else's choices unless it's challenging their own orientation, right? There's organizational leaders, right, that have done, quote unquote, wildly successful things for a company. And when they're asked to rebrand or put forth a new company slogan or complete overhaul of their employee system, if that disrupts them so deeply that they can't perform as a leader, what does that say about them? So I think that mismatch and disruption always goes back to what does it look like internally for that person, because any sort of defensive posturing towards another person's calm peace presentation, I always say, like, respectfully, it says more about them than it does about me. So I don't know what they're wrestling with internally, but there's a root to that that's actually not about what I'm living. It's something deeper within them.
What you're saying here is so right on, and it's kind of, to riff off that a little bit, it's almost like you're illustrating the difference between jealousy and envy, because people use those
Hmm.
terms interchangeably, but they're not the same
Hmm.
thing. And what you're describing is envy. You
Hmm.
have what I should have, and I don't, and I'm mad about it.
And I'm so pissed, and I'm going to show you in every way, like with my voice, being a keyboard, like warrior. I'm going to prove that to you. And it's so sad because what that does is only illuminate that pain in that person. And it fires up the pain instead of using that as fuel for their own reorientation. Envy is about lack, right? Like envy is like I see something, like I'm envious of them because I lack what I want. Jealousy is about, I think, a threat. Like I'm
Right.
threatened by what that is.
But
I mean, I
it's
guess they can show up together because it's for sure.
for sure. But I think jealousy is more like, I have it and I'm worried that you might take it from me. Whereas envy is, you have it and I don't. And so I
Hmm.
want to ruin it for you.
Right. I want to take there's no way that that's truthful, or there's no way that I'm taking in your reality as truth, because it can't, if that is truthful, if that is your reality, if I'm witnessing that, then what does that say about my own self? And it has less to do about money and things and accoutrements and trips and typical children or whatever. It has so much to do with the internal system of oneself and the freedom with which they are to be independent with their actions. It just exacerbates it. And it's, I mean, broken record here. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
So as we wrap up here, how do you see your advocacy? I can talk. How do you see that changing the landscape? Is it, or do you feel like you're just this lone voice? Not that you care, because you would remain the lone voice and be
hmm
perfectly fine with that. But do you see it changing the landscape at all?
I see it beginning to change the landscape. I think that that roadmap in my mind is like this living organism where, like, almost like a child, right? Those first 2 years, you're learning so much, but you don't really see much surface from it. You see that it's like all these skill sets are being built. And I think I'm that this first phase, probably like phase one into phase two of my advocacy journey, is like I'm becoming the voice that name what others can't. And then that language is going to turn into more like tactical like humility as a leader in the space. And then over time that will turn into deeply helping the transform the system and to train those adults that support and are around them from a societal standpoint. It's going to evolve. I I think I can say, and you probably can with your own sense of self, there's no way that this is going to stay stagnant. It's going to evolve. I don't know what that means from a from the visual chart of it, but I know right now there's so much input that is learning about, oh my gosh, what has the system and society conditioned for us? And how can I start naming that truth in order to extract and keep extracting and create pockets of women and mothers all around the country and the world who go, whoa, I see it now. Like we're removing ourselves from it and we're going to march on. And it's never in a way to say that anyone that is in that world is wrong, but that there is another choice. And that's like always what I try to shine the spotlight on, is it can be both, but there's always another choice in which that you're able to live. And I hope that that becomes, more present as the years go on within my work.
I think that you, maybe without realizing it, hit the nail on the head, because in both of our fields, the fields evolve as long as
hmm
we do.
hmm
And so, again, it all comes back to orientation.
It really does. Like, where is my voice right now most irreplaceable? It feels like for me right now, it's continuing to grow the community on Substack of mine, continuing to be like a voice where I can on stage at conferences within companies, challenging the narrative. I don't know what the next thing might be. It might be, you know, building my own product or becoming more of a challenge to the media at large, or training systems internally from a wildly crazy journey as a special needs parent. But I think that you're right. It's knowing and being so okay with reorienting all the time. And that's uncomfortable. But the best part about that is that you see growth and you see transformation, and that's the life luxury that you can't replace. You can't purchase that.
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a joy. I love talking to you.
Well, thank you, Kit, and I appreciate your work so much. And I think that as much as social media can get a bad rep, finding each other on Substack, finding our work, and realizing that we are all out there digging deep into something that is starting to become spoken out loud more and more. And I'm just so thankful for who you are and the work that you're doing.
I'm left reflecting after this conversation on how deeply narratives shape our orientation to reality, especially in worlds as raw and demanding as profound autism. Sarah pulled back the curtain on the scripts we're handed: the martyr mom, the sanitized autism Barbie, those comforting fictions that keep families isolated and exhausted. But what hit me is her refusal to let those distortions define her or her kids. Instead, she chooses reorientation, 1 inch stone at a time. And she embraces vulnerability, joy, and self leadership amid this chaos where failure can be harmful. This is systems thinking in action when you think about it, recognizing how societal stories fuse our identities to suffering and block us from seeing the clearer path. Sarah's journey shows that envy, defensiveness, and martyr mode aren't inevitable. You're not locked into that. They're signals of mismatched orientation, and that means they're invitations to write the script. In a culture that praises exhaustion, her insistence on rest as infrastructure and truth as liberation is really revolutionary. It's trauma psychology meets counterintelligence, right? Spotting the lies that keep us compliant and choosing freedom anyway. Start small. Question the narrative. Reorient to what's true, not what's comfortable. Your joy is your power. I am so thankful to Sarah for her fierce authenticity and for modeling what reoriented living looks like. She's changed the game for a lot of people. Thanks for listening.